Hello and welcome to this online sharing session of the International Society for Music Education, specifically the Applied Pedagogy Special Interest Group. One of the issues that I think is so important for teacher educators is to make a connection between theory and practice, between the concept and the sort of abstraction to the actual practical setting where real music teaching and music learning takes place. So thank you all for your interest in this, and thank you especially to the presenters for agreeing to present this afternoon in this virtual forum. It's sort of unusual, but I think that we do things in unusual times that make the most sense given the context. And I think that musicians have always improvised. So I think it's important for us to remember that. And sometimes the improvisations go as we planned and sometimes they don't. But I think it's important to also always be engaged and to have that spirit moving forward. So thank you very much for your participation. And that being said, I'll ask that Barbara go ahead and begin. Oh, one other thing, if you haven't seen it in the chat window, there is an agenda that I posted with the order of presenters. So just so you know, you can follow along on our rough timeline, the flow of the sessions. All the abstracts will be posted on an ISME website, as well as a recording of this session. So if you want to review and come back and watch things again and so on, you're welcome to have those resources following the online session this afternoon. So if you have a question, you're welcome to ask during the presentation, but I would prefer if you type it into the chat or wait until that speaker has finished. Okay, I think that's enough preamble. So I will mute myself. Oh, Judy?
I don't see Barbara's name on the participants list. Is she someplace else?
No, I am. My name is listed as Ruth Fast, but that is my middle name. So I am here as Barbara
okay,
Ruth
good.
Fast.
Thank
yes,
you.
I'm
Thank
here.
You.
I apologize for the confusion.
That's okay.
And as a way of more formal introductions, our first speaker is Barbara Fast. She is from the University of Oklahoma in the United States. Butch Marshall is from Kent State University. Judy Bond is from the University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point. And the other speaker who is not here yet, Wendy Matthews, is from Kent State University as well. As you can see, I'm from the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, behind me here. It's my virtual background. It's on the coast of North Carolina. And Shane McKenna is having an asynchronous presentation. He's from Trinity College in Dublin, Ireland. So we have international, mostly American presenters, and then of course an international audience. So thank you for your attention, and I'll turn things over to Barbara.
Okay, well, thank you. First of all, can everyone hear me? If I just get a few thumbs up, we're good. Okay, thank you, thank you. Well, I'm just going to jump in with this presentation. Hopefully it will be relatively brief, that there'll be time for questions at the end on it. So, practicing in the time of COVID-19. Well, COVID-19 hit mid-semester 2020 in March, while I was teaching a course on practicing for performance for the very first time, and where the students were required to experiment with new practice techniques. Suddenly, we had to go online, as I know all of you did too. And students, of course, their own practice routines were just suddenly gone, literally obliterated. And so what really struck, this was in my abstract, how to practice flute in a one-room apartment with a roommate. I had a piano major how to practice piano or keyboard in an apartment with a roommate who hated the sound of clicking keys. All of these became incredibly pressing issues. I had started the course experimentally, and I'll be talking about that as an overview on it. And what I found, to my surprise, I really was teaching it organically, is kind of the premise, the basic premises I had started out with held for the whole semester. And let me just give you an idea with that. I had students that the big goal of the course was to experiment with their practicing. And I've done a lot of research. This has been a very long time interest of mine. I had the first section just called Take Action, where they, based on research, they had to experiment with ideas throughout the semester. And then I called it a getting to it, various ideas on getting yourself to the practice room, as I know that's an issue for many students, or how to stay focused in the practice room. The third one was I included a positive tip every week. And this one I felt like I was stepping out on a limb to do. I didn't know if students would think it was like, you know, crazy, cheesy, whatever. That became very popular, and particularly during COVID, students really utilized it through the whole semester. I really based a lot of that on ideas from positive psychology, Martin Seligman, and various positive psychologists. I also had students, and this is quite experimental, set up a practice or idea journal. I thought they might abandon this. I did it experimentally. Many students stayed with it, and for some it became critically important to them. And then of course they had readings. And I should say this was open to all students, all instrumentalists, all pianists, all vocalists, undergrad, master's, and doctoral students, and there was truly a mix in the class. My own background is a pianist. I double majored piano and flute. My area of interest right now where I teach is piano pedagogy. So that gives you an overview of the course. We also spent time really looking at ideas like interleaved practice. I started out with that. There's been so much research in the sports world, and where all this research says how successful it is, and can we bring it over into the music world? And at least in the piano world, we are really sports people with our arms and our fingers. Interleaved practice, I utilize, that has become my hot topic with almost anyone I'm working with, where you intersperse intervals of practice within a time period. This has shown to be so much more effective, both in the sports world and in music practicing. It's very difficult to do, so I have students start out with it using a timer, and they kind of morph it into their own work as time goes on. I also worked a lot at the beginning with mapping music, where they draw pictures or diagrams of the music. If you want to know more about that, Rebecca Shockley in her book, Mapping Music, discusses that in great detail. That also became popular, and I'll reference that in just a little bit again. We also talked about variable practice, which is rather than just taking one idea to fix a problem, that you cycle through various things, not just uneven rhythms, but maybe changing forte to piano, piano to forte, changing tempos, etc. And again, it's amazing research in the sports world, how effective that is versus finding one way to fix an issue on it. Maybe talking about what I referenced were some very unusual ideas that the students came up with, particularly I think because of COVID. They simply had to move into ways of coping for themselves. So what I had started out in the semester saying you must be experimental, they were forced to be experimental in their practice. One of the most fun ideas, excuse me, that happened came from, this was a doctoral flutist early on, was pajama practice, where the student described at the end of the day, she was too tired to really practice the flute, putting on her pajamas, crawling into bed, opening her score with her flute, and then kind of just listening and following along. I was really struck with that and I actually immediately tried it myself with a piano score, because I thought, what a great idea, because it really enforces oral listening. I knew it would be a huge reinforcement for memory work for any pianists, and that's a big issue for pianists. I had mentioned this was a really fun idea based off the mapping. One of the students, I called it refrigerator cooking practice. She took her map, stuck it on the refrigerator, and then played the piece that she was working on just in the background. And as she was cooking, trying to think, oh, where am I in the piece? And do I know where it is on the score? Trying to find it. So again, it was a wonderful oral test of the work that she was practicing. There was an organist who took the mapping idea. It was kind of pre-mapping. He took his, I think it was based off the mapping, but he actually took his score, and it was very, very small pieces of paper, pasted it on a very large notebook. and put that on the organ. He was large work he was memorizing, and again he used it as kind of a visual test for himself. I had a lot of students who developed kind of buddy practice, kind of out of the getting to it idea, using Snapchat, sharing little practice videos with each other. I could go further on various ideas we talked about. I spent quite a bit of time with the ear, oral practice, a lot of time with the Slowdowner app. My brother plays in New York Philharmonic, and they live by this app. In my piano world, that's kind of a, you're not supposed to listen to music. We're the only ones who have this hang up. No other area of musicians really do. But that was really fun to have students experiment with that, listening to their music, slowing it down, and then playing along with it. Again, it's all based on an oral model. They can either create their own oral model at a slow tempo, play along with it, or use another oral model and then play along with that. I played around with musical selfies. I've done this for many years now. A video record, a practice session, share it with each other, et cetera, et cetera. I think I won't go into any more details on the course outside of saying it was, allowing students and kind of insisting that they experiment, giving them concrete ideas, research, and then say, please experiment with this, and then report back. Became very popular. It was incredibly inspiring. I believe it was also inspiring for the students at the same time. In terms of resources, I did use the book iPractice, Technology in the 21st Century Music Practice Room. I did co-author it with Jennifer Mishra, Oxford University Press, 2018. Equally important, and probably more important, I referenced Noah Kageyama's Bulletproof Musician blog. It is based on research, and he has a wonderful, very friendly blog style writing, very, very readable. And I had reading assignments every week from his blog as well. I think I'll stop there and just allow any questions that there might be from the group.
Very good. Thank you, Barbara. I would like to open it up for questions if people want to unmute themselves and just begin to ask, or if you would prefer to type into the chat, that would be fine too. As Barbara was presenting, it occurred to me that it might be helpful for us to see the abstract. Would people like to see those abstracts? I could share them if people are interested now. They will be posted on an ISME site. Do we have any feedback on that? Got a thumbs up from Wendy. Okay, good. So I will search for her abstract on my computer and share it within the Zoom app while Barbara takes questions. Who has a question for Barbara? Can you talk a little more about the app that your brother uses?
Okay, Slowdowner app. The Slowdowner, my favorite, there's many versions of this, and there are many free versions. If you just Google Slowdowner app, you'll find them on Google and for Apple. My favorite version of it is called the Amazing Slowdowner. You do have to pay for that one. It's just very elegant, and there's no advertisement behind it. And now actually on YouTube has a Slowdowner version on it, but it doesn't give you as much control on it. What my brother does two things in the New York Philharmonic. He may just take a work that he can find, some orchestra playing, and he plays contrabassoon, hard instrument, and he was, you're just trying to find, what can't I play, what do I need to practice? And then he will find a recording of some orchestra and then just play along with it to, and he uses various versions of it. So he's practicing at different tempos. You never know what your conductor is going to do. The other way he uses it, and this actually I think is a little bit more profound, and I actually have used it in my group piano classes with students, where he will find his most difficult section and he will record himself, he says usually at about 50%. Now he's putting it onto a computer, like Audacity or something. And then he records the next measure, literally, and I call it stitching it together, hooks it together on Audacity, the next measure. Suddenly he has played one measure at a time, 50% speed, hooking it together. He can put it into his app, and then he starts playing along with himself. And he says it's just so incredibly motivating to hear himself play. And then he can, as he bumps up the speed on the Slow Downer app, he just keeps bumping up his real speed. And he says it's very motivating to keep playing with himself being bumped up in speed by the app on it. So I've used that idea in group piano teaching where I had students, I said, I don't care how slow you play it, just play it. You have to play it with no hesitations. But then once you've got that, I called it the perfect, a recording, you can practice with yourself to bring up the speed on it. I first was introduced to this idea, honestly, about 4 or 5 years. It's been a long time, feels like a while, 4, 5, 6 years ago. When I got really excited about the idea, I thought, oh my gosh, this is amazing. One of my grad students told me, she said, oh, Dr. Fast, I learn all my repertoire with Slow Downer apps. I find 3 different recordings and I just practice playing along. Now, I think if you're a woodwind player or brass player, I don't think that sounds so unusual. In my piano world, I felt like I had to be like this with my piano faculty, not letting them know that, oh my gosh, I'm playing along with recordings on it. The pianists are notorious. I think it's an old idea. We are we're obsessed with reading music, right? And so we're so afraid of the ear, that the ear is going to destroy our reading music. And I don't know, after so much work in the field, the first thing I believe in is the ear. My brother in the New York field says, the only way we all survive is we know that if we can hear it, we can play it. If I can hear it, my fingers can play it. So that really has, I don't know, it's really it's been a lot of fun to work with. And I work with that ear aspect in many, many different ways. It's really, really fun. I kind of went on and on after one question. Sorry. You asked the perfect question.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. Carl, Carl asks, how would you summarize the students and your perceptions of the efficacy in strategies reported by the students compared to the regular practicing strategies? And have the students' understanding of the music changed as a consequence of these strategies?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, how can I really quantify it? Outside of students being very excited about it, and now that, we're still in COVID, but now I'm seeing them a little bit more. Their big thing is, in fact, I'm team teaching with one of the students in the class, and now that she's talking to it's group piano, collegiate, when she's talking to them about practicing piano, her big thing is, she says, experiment, try different things. Just don't get locked into one routine of something, whatever it is. So it's interesting to see what sticks, what holds over after a summer break. I was just team teaching with another student, and what he told a student, he was talking about getting to it, like get to it early in the morning, get to it when your mind is fresh. I thought, okay, that's what stuck for him. That's what really was the most profound or life-changing for him. So I think it's varied for each student what caused the greatest change for them on it. It's a really vague answer.
One question I had for you, Barbara, is if you could talk a bit more about the positive psychology and any more specifics that.
Yeah, boy, I had a bunch of strategies. I got this. Well, I mean, I'm going to be real honest. I was real honest with my students, and maybe this was why the course was successful. I kind of ran into these ideas, I don't know, on the internet or something, and stuff that I have used, but I knew it came from Martin Seligman specifically, like starting a day with asking, like when I get really in a funk about something, like overwhelmed, too much to do, just to stop and say, okay, list 3 things that have gone very well and why. And there are videos out with Martin Seligman talking about this. The key thing is, why did those things go well? Well, it's always because if you did something positive, it's because you took action, you did something. And I've used that for myself over, I don't know, quite a while. And it can just, boom, flip me out of some kind of negative whatever and boom, and just get me working again. So I use those things that I was aware of. And I'd say, try this, just try it for a week on it. And then there are other ideas. Students brought up kind of the idea, you know, there's so much out on gratitude. And I've always been a little bit, oh yeah, gratitude. But a student brought it up. And so I said, I gave an assignment on, you know, the positive psychologist, you're supposed to do it, I think, before going to bed. I said, either do it before going to bed or going when you wake up. Well, I said, okay, I'm asking my students to experiment with it, so I've got to do it too. Well, it has become one of my favorite things to do. I didn't do it this morning, but I did it yesterday morning. You know, list 5 things I'm grateful for. The students came back. I had students, it was remarkable. I had students come back say, oh, I'm all of a sudden falling asleep. I all of a sudden can sleep better. I all of a sudden can do that. Tiny little suggestion changed lives in a massive way. And it got me out of my kind of rolling my eyes at the idea of actually utilizing it myself. So if you're interested in it, you can easily Google Martin Seligman, positive psychology, and you'll kind of run into these very applicable, easy to use ideas. There are videos out that's, when I taught the class, this whole thing, Seligman has done a video on this whole, there's research on it, why it's so successful, this, what did I do and why what, you know, what did I do and why did it go well? There's research on why that is so helpful for our brains. It looks like there may not be, you know, I might end this session by saying the one thing I said to students at the beginning of COVID, and I've been saying it this semester too, and it kind of falls along that positive psychology thing. And I think it's just important for all of us to remember is that, and particularly for the young people, this is such an unusual time. It will be a marked time in their life, and they will look back on it as thinking back how they dealt with it, what was important during this time, what they learned from it. And to say, you know, even in these very difficult circumstances, you will be creative, you will be imaginative, and just run with it, learn from this time, pay attention to it. And it can be a really important, it will be an important time in your life, and it can have, even though there's so many difficult things about it, for all of us, there are very positive things that can come out of that. And I've really tried to kind of put that, keep that forefront for students, because I do think it will be massively important for them later in their life when they look back on it.
Great, great. I would agree with that. Yeah. I think that one of the things that struck me was the sort of transdisciplinary or interdisciplinary approach that you had said, specifically with the sports psychology or training as a musician. And I think many of us, well, I can't say that. I think some of us are more artistic and have an artistic sort of approach to making music, which is certainly admirable. But I think sometimes it is more about muscle control, and it's about repetition, and it's about the technical side that really many students would benefit from directly. And I think that, in my opinion, that has a more direct parallel with the sports psychology and the drill and skill approach. So, and I know Wendy has done research in that area too, about looking at musicians and sports and looking at that athletic sort of parallel with music. So I thought that was interesting.
Well, thank you. It's always been an interest of mine on it, and they have so much money. They've researched it so well. So, anyway.
Other thoughts, questions for Barbara? I am preparing my abstract upload right now, so we will have that for our next session. A word of caution, it's not the final abstract. Wendy and I have made a couple of changes, but we're happy to share what we have now in this Google Doc here. Okay, and there we go. Okay, very good. So let's have a virtual round of applause for Barbara.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and here. Okay, so in the chat window, I posted a Google Doc link to the abstract as it is. We will make a few adjustments a little later, but we will. I think that'll be useful for us to see in our next presentation. Let's see, Wendy, are you ready? She needs to unmute.
Hold on. There you go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I am ready when you are, Dan.
Okay, great. I will find my other document here. Okay. I think my biggest concern is I think I know how to use Zoom very well, and sometimes I don't. So anyway, here we are. This is our screen share. And let's begin. So everyone should be able to see my screen here. Yes? Okay, good. So in this session, Wendy Matthews and I are presenting some practical applications from our previous research on projects about instructional planning. And this is an important yet often neglected aspect common to music education in many, if not all, teaching contexts. The instructional decisions that teachers make indicate their focus of attention and encompass practical matters as well as fundamental pedagogical topics. These decisions teachers often make rely on their professional knowledge and information gleaned from classroom observations. More specifically, decisions are influenced by the emerging classroom environment as well as by teachers' experiences, values, and pedagogical content knowledge. So one key area of instruction decisions is assessment. Teachers' instructional decisions through assessment can reveal how and why they teach in a particular way and how they measure student learning. And that can vary by musical context. So the purpose of the study was to explore perspectives on instructional strategies in contrasting settings, general music, non-performance, and choral and instrumental performance settings. We are going to review our research in these two settings, encompassing both the performance and non-performance classes. The aim of the studies was to investigate nuances in the processes of factors contributing to music teachers' instructional strategies. And our framework specifies 3 phases of instruction: planning, instruction itself, and then reflection. And the pre-instruction decision, the actual teaching time with students, and the deliberation occurring after instruction. Those decisions reflect repertoire choices, and they include instructional decisions such as reflection in action and evaluative decision, and they demonstrate ways of gathering evidence for follow-up and for teacher self-reflection. The theoretical background is a combination of constructivist and descriptive approaches that allowed us to investigate music teachers' instructional decision-making from multiple lenses. So our presentation this afternoon explores the importance of instructional decision-making, how it can have importance in many teaching contexts, and how those decisions can fundamentally and directly impact the lives of their students. So as reflective practitioners, teachers scrutinize the learning environment, they establish goals for their students, and they plan how to achieve these goals, evaluate the results, and thoughtfully reflect on their own professional beliefs. So we're going to be presenting results. Excuse me, people keep coming and knocking at the door, so I have to let them in. We'll be presenting results from 2 qualitative studies on this theme and making connections in different teaching contexts. The first study focused on general music, while the second study considered secondary choral and secondary instrumental settings. The purpose of the general music study was to explore the underlying reasoning behind instructional decision-making used by experienced general music teachers. So we asked, how do experienced general music teachers describe their decision-making processes? Previously, researchers have investigated motivation in terms of music using parameters such as self-efficacy, teacher influence, and classroom environment. The majority of motivation research on music teaching and learning has primarily focused on student motivation. But there is a need for more research that examines teacher motivation and fully integrates the affect and emotional aspects of teaching. So in this study, we employed a tandem lens of two perspectives on motivation. We used McClelland's secondary motivation, as you can see here, that is achievement, power, and affiliation, and Zimmerman's self-regulation model, self-generated thoughts, feelings, and actions in realization of personal goals. To carry out the study, we designed a two-phase qualitative approach, and in phase one, 7 experienced classroom music teachers wrote open-ended responses to online questionnaires. And they had 3 different scenarios adapted from Pat Sheen Campbell and Scott Kasner's Music in Childhood. These scenarios represented different classroom situations and presented specific motivational challenges. And even though it's a relatively recent addition to the research methodology, the use of scenarios and case studies facilitate critical and reflective thinking. The protocol allowed for participants to express themselves freely by giving them multiple opportunities to comment on and to react to many aspects of the instruction, classroom management, curriculum, and the learning environment. After reading the scenarios, each participant explained how they would finish a particular lesson and provided reasons for their answers. In this way, we maintain an open-ended and qualitative nature in our study. In the phase 2, we interviewed the participants more to explore their written responses and to clarify their perspectives. The analysis began by using open coding to focus on the lived experiences of the participants. This approach also enabled us to examine specific decisions in the response to the scenarios and to develop themes around those responses. Multiple analysts, peer reviews, systematic data coding, they all enhance the data analysis, the triangulation, the credibility, and the rigor of this study. And the participants' response focused on classroom procedures, behavioral management, and promoting work and social skills. They also highlighted the importance of fitting into schools as institutions, practicing specific methodologies, reflecting on their practice. After the analysis, we found 3 emerging themes. The first was helping students learn and develop their musical skills, promoting social skills, and utilizing specific instructional strategies. So these are some representative quotes that illustrate the insights and the perspectives in the teacher's own words. For example, in the achievement category, the participant said, only when most of the class was successful with the 4-beat patterns would I move on to the 8-beat patterns. And they also said that another person said, I find that teaching rhythm patterns as body percussion first provides an opportunity for students to internalize the rhythm. So I think we can see and hear in that some echoes of pretty standard ways to teach general music methodologies. In the affiliation category, the person said, the children in this class need to see the behavior, see that behavior has consequences, and how we treat other needs is a lesson in itself and needs to be modeled at all times. So here we have a sort of a social awareness, and I think this might foreshadow a bit of what Butch and Judy may be discussing in their section. Then we have specific instructional strategies or methodologies. The person said, I might ask students to listen for rhyming words. Transitions are very important, making sure to state expectations clearly before, so we can minimize off-task behavior. It's a very practical sort of applied language there. We conducted member checks, and we also provided internal validity for these findings in a way to sort of close that loop. As we finished, we conceptualized a new model of music teacher motivation, and this is based on the tandem lens of the secondary motivation and the self-regulation. And this 3-part figure illustrates the connections between the instructional strategies, the social skills, and finally, the student understanding. The conclusions include implications for understanding the effect that teachers and socio-cultural environments have on shaping student motivation, for improving teachers' self-awareness, and for recognizing their primary focus area. This shapes teacher education curriculum in terms of student achievement, in terms of music cognition, and in terms of general music instruction. So as planned, we expanded our line of research to compare and contrast these findings with performance-oriented contexts, that is choral and instrumental ensembles at the middle and high school or the secondary level.
Okay, so I'll take over the next study. You guys can hear me? Excellent, thank you. So we decided for our next phase of our research is to design and complete a second study involving the context of choral and instrumental music teachers in much the same manner as we did the general music study. We first, however, considered the context of performing ensembles, choral and instrumental, in comparison to that of the non-performing music classes. Many secondary choral and instrumental programs emphasize performance as the primary form of both formative and summative assessment. Instruction in these ensembles highlights performance technique, such as psychomotor skills, along with group cohesion. Connotations of these ensembles are characterized by frequent performances for a variety of school and civic events, such as halftime football shows, holiday parades, school assemblies, and public concerts. Consequently, directors need to ensure the performance quality of their groups. Sorry, my computer just messed up. Sorry, it's back. Consequently, directors need to ensure the performance quality of their groups for a wide range of audiences and events. Much of the focus for secondary music teachers during choral and instrumental instruction highlights proper tone production, posture, and other specific psychomotor skills. Therefore, these teachers not only guide their students in developing the necessary performance techniques, but they also direct or conduct their ensembles in rehearsals and performance. These directors therefore fulfill multiple roles. For this reason, the corresponding decision-making and assessment practices need to be addressed to address both the technique and the musicianship in student performance. So the purpose of the second study was to explore the ways choral and instrumental teachers teach and assess their students as they make instructional choices. Our corresponding research questions were: what decision-making processes do expert choral and instrumental music teachers use as they plan, execute, and reflect on their classroom instruction? Second, what motivates them to make these decisions? And how does the musical setting influence pedagogical decisions? Based on similar literature reviews as the general music study, we developed a parallel methodology to investigate and compare how these instrumental and choral contexts influence teachers' assessment and decision-making. We collected two separate data sets. For both sets of the data, grounded theory provided the strategies for data collection and the emergent theme analysis. For both groups of teachers, choral and instrumental, we contacted a personal sample of experienced secondary music teachers to serve as participants. On the slide, you can see the demographics of our participants. And I'll give you a second to read those. So for our findings, the findings represented three main themes that highlighted the overall similarities of the decision-making process described by the choral and instrumental music educators. The major themes were pedagogy, student motivation, and classroom management. The first theme of pedagogy included how participants focused on particular instructional strategies to develop student musical knowledge. More specifically, the three areas of instructional strategies that emerge within the respective settings were using warm-ups to teach skills and focus student attention, scaffolding student learning, and assessing student learning. With regard to the theme of student motivation, responses from the participants had a high degree of consistency. Replies from both sets centered around three areas: balancing challenges and success, creating a positive rehearsal climate, and highlighting the aspects of teamwork. The third theme we found was classroom management. This included four approaches common to both choral and instrumental participants. First, clear expectations and consequences. Second, specific management strategies. 3, the use of teacher reflection. And 4, ways to address unforeseen problems. In general, both choral and instrumental music respondents highlight the importance of utilizing a variety of strategies to focus student learning through the rehearsal. Also, as both settings involve student working in ensembles, directors from both groups indicated the importance of the second theme, student motivation. Respondents focused on balancing success and challenges and creating that positive rehearsal climate and highlighting the value of teamwork. Within classroom management, both sets of participants mentioned specific expectations and structures to prevent and respond to behavioral problems in the respective settings. Within each theme, variations emerged that described the differences between choral and instrument setting. Those included developing techniques specific to the voice or to the varied instruments. They also highlighted different aspects of music literacy and utilizing different methods to motivate ensembles. So in conclusion, the findings from the study illustrate how expert choral and instrumental teachers describe their decision-making process as prompted by our 3 rehearsal scenarios. We found a multiplicity of similarities in the scenario responses among choral and instrumental teachers. Regardless of their musical setting, choral and instrumental participants highlighted the importance of pedagogical knowledge and instructional strategies as they describe decisions about how they would assist students in advancing their musical skills and knowledge. The teachers also focused on the importance of developing group skills to create unity within their ensembles. Participants also agreed on the importance of making classroom management decisions, clarifying expectations, and following through with consequences when needed. Despite the possibility that differences in the musical setting would amplify inconsistencies in participant decision-making processes, our emergent themes demonstrated more parallel processes than differences. The overall commonalities in the decision-making process between choral and instrumental participants may be a function of similarities in the overall common tasks, such as leading musical ensembles, teaching performance skills, and developing musical understanding. Themes from both the choral and instrumental responses indicated overlapping ideas, yet there were subtle differences. These differences aligned with specific pedagogies related to developing vocal or instrumental techniques. For example, choral teachers focused on their warm-ups and assessments on vocal tone production, while instrumental teachers focused on fingerings and scales. Similarly, interpersonal versus interpersonal foci, as related to the group unification, represented setting-based differences in the student motivational theme. Also, the use of seating by teachers as a classroom management tool also varied by setting, with more emphasis on inclusive pedagogy being apparent in the choral participants' response, while the musical setting might appear to shape the tools that ensemble directors use to meet their goals of instructional decisions seem to be congruent across both the choral and instrumental music educational settings. The implications for both of these studies include improving in-service teacher awareness, advancing professional development for experienced teachers, and enhancing the effectiveness of music teacher education programs. Other implications of this study include increasing music teacher educator faculties, and familiarity with appropriate assessment strategies, especially those that correspond to teachers' contextualized instructional decision-making. These and other insights will forward instructional strategies for music teacher education pedagogy and practice.
I will stop the screen share there and say thank
Okay.
you for your attention. We have about 5 minutes if people had questions or comments about that. You can see in the chat there's a draft of our abstract that we'll probably be fixing up a little later.
Yeah. And what was interesting for us is we originally went into the second study really thinking there'd be huge differences. And it was very interesting to see that performance-based teachers really have a lot of the same focus when they make instructional decisions.
Yes, Barbara.
This is really a personal question, but I'm always interested, you as researchers, so you're immersed in this, what in your own research has caused you to change something or in your own teaching? You know, what has really been impactful for you in now when you're just teaching or in sharing with students?
I guess for me, since I do a lot, as I spend a lot of time as a band director and as a teacher educator, that daily I'll be on the podium and go, oh, that's probably not something I should do, or oh, I just talked about my students, I need to make sure I do this, or here's a new thing. So it always seems like a lava lamp of going back and forth between the performance, what I'm doing, and then the pedagogical knowledge behind what I'm doing and sharing that on both platforms. I think as a conductor, I spend a lot of time talking about why I'm doing something more than you say I do. So I spend a lot of time saying, this is my goal and this is where I'm going and this is the strategy and why I think the strategy will work, or even open to strategy discussions with students. Since I spend a lot of time researching self-regulation and decision-making and those kinds of loops, I spend a lot of time in the loops. What about you, Dan?
Well, I would say that um, I I base the changes I make in my own instruction from a bigger feedback loop when I talk to my interns as they graduate. And I say, okay, so you've really grown and developed here. How is this, look back on the past year? And so I have them for methods and then an internship. And so it's really about their own growth and maturity. And then I say, okay, if that's this kind of preparation with a vocalist or an instrumentalist, and I say, well, what would make the biggest difference for you? And then they give me their feedback as the experience of it, I guess, would be the most important thing. And really, everyone's different on some level, but at the same time, there are certain commonalities or similarities that I think are important to highlight and use it as a springboard.
Yeah, and I think for both of us, we usually pick our research strand based on something that we had a conversation about or we noticed in our students. Since Dan and I both come from general music and performance-based classes, we're always like, why did that happen? Or why does the student not get that? Or what are teachers thinking? So it kind of morphs all together. The research question is usually driven by a puzzlement that we kind of had separately and together about our pre-service teachers.
Absolutely, and that's a nice connection with the practical application of this special interest group. About how we can look at the application of the pedagogy, both in terms of the K-12 setting, but also in terms of teacher education. Mariana has her hand raised. Yes, Mariana. At least I think she's got her hand raised. Oh, she's clapping. Okay. Super. Okay, we are about at the end of our time slot, unless there are other questions or comments for us. Terrell?
Yeah, I just have one question, and I was wondering, the dichotomy that's kind of been shaped between general music practitioners and instrumental and choral practitioners. Maybe this is just a further research question, but I'm very interested to see how COVID-19 actually may impact the idea of general music teachers instrumental and choral teachers. I'm a choral practitioner, because we're doing a lot of different types of teaching right now. And I would venture to say we are general music teachers in every setting. But I would be interested in, is there any kind of things that kind of came out of the research that could illuminate that topic? It's not really a question, but that topic.
Not to my knowledge, but I think it's very interesting that you talk about the way that COVID-19 and the teaching virtually gives perhaps the ensemble directors a different experience. They're not on the podium, and I don't know enough about that. I'll ask Wendy to give her thoughts.
Yeah, I think anecdotally, it is an amazing research topic to actually look at how ensemble directors are dealing with COVID right now. And the big issue is, I think, kind of almost in a growth mindset. How can we still meet the same objectives, but in not a large ensemble setting? So colleagues and I that I've talked to, we're in chamber music settings. We're also, like you said, almost in a general music setting. And I think we learn more from general music. We should incorporate more, but how do we do comprehensive musicianship? How do we reach out to composers? How do we be more entrepreneurial? So I think if you look at the standards, our artistic processes, we're getting more out of performance and more into composing and more into the things that I think our general music colleagues have been very comfortable with and do very well. So I think we can really learn a lot from those kinds of modes of instruction and really get those in there, but always thinking about what are our objectives and how do we continue to work on those ensemble skills in different ways. So I think it's going to be very creative in the end. I mean, I'm not a happy puppy right now because I don't know what I don't know and I don't know what's going on. But I think in the end, there's some things already I've learned. One of the things, just watching the videos of my students perform, solo by themselves, parts of band stuff, I've learned more about their playing than I think I normally learn in a 30-minute, a 2-hour rehearsal with them. I've gotten some more individual insight. So I think there's some real positives, and we've had time to do chamber music, and we've had more time to do comprehensive musicianship. So I think there are, so far, there've been a lot of positives besides the craziness. So
Yeah,
I don't know if it's the same for you.
and the last thing I would just like to add to that is that the ensemble directors maybe are faced with the challenge or the opportunity of not focusing always on performing. It's not always about the instrument. It's not always about rehearsing. It's not always about the vocal technique, perhaps. And I may be a disadvantage, it may be an opportunity. I don't know. I think time will tell. And like Wendy says, you know, maybe there are ways that we can incorporate some positives. But thanks for your
Yeah.
question, Carol.
Thank you.
We are going to move along to Butch and to Judy. Oh, okay.
No.
Thank you. Thank you. It's thunderous applause. I can hear it around the world. Okay, so we're going to move along to Judy and Butch's presentation. In the chat, Butch has posted a Google Doc link for his abstract and Judy's abstract, so I will turn things over to them.
Dan, did the video that I made, did that ever get sent out or not?
Yes, it went to the ISME office, and they'll post it along with the other videos. Yes.
Okay. Okay, great.
I can share that YouTube link if you want people to have it.
Well, that would be good if it's easy to share. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'll start off and then turn this back to Butch, but I'd like to start off by saying that I've always been interested in social justice concerns and how they relate to us in music education, and especially how they relate to us if we're training the next generation of music teachers. So I come from the Alliance for Active Music Making, where we have tried to collaborate between some of the major music education organizations that are devoted to Orff, Kodály, Dalcroze, and Gordon approaches. And when I wrote the abstract, it was last October, and that was before COVID-19, and it was also before all of the racial unrest that is now part of our lives in the US especially, but really around the world. And so everything changed about this topic, and the topic seems even more important than it was. And so I looked at it quite differently, and I have a bunch of questions at the end of what we're talking about, and I'm hoping that you'll all think about these things and help us deal with them. But I want to start out by saying something about these different organizations and how they've changed their attitudes toward the need to deal with this topic in their work. And the only organization of the four that we originally started out with, devoted to these different approaches, the only organization that started working on this issue before I wrote the abstract is the American Orff Schullwerk Association. And starting in 2018 with an editorial by Tiffany English, who was the president of AOSA at that time, they started working on the idea of diversity and the need for diversity. And about the same time, we also started working on that idea in the Alliance for Active Music Making. However, after the death of George Floyd and the rise of Black Lives Matter, which had been going for a couple years before, but really rose up after the death of George Floyd, every single organization started to do something. They were like on alert, and they started making statements and writing proposals. And one of the most interesting ones came from the Organization of American Kodály Educators, because they wrote an action statement, and they really seemed to have a lot of humility about their attitudes in the past. And they came up with a pledge to do better when it came to racial diversity. And I thought that was a pretty amazing thing. Another one is from the Dalcroze Society of America, and what they decided to do was to come up with ways of undoing racism And so they are having a series of conversations on Sunday mornings, once a month, to have people engage in talking about how they can undo racism in their own communities within music education. And the Gordon Institute for Music Learning has also made a commitment, and this is on their website and in their newsletter. They have made a commitment to become an anti-racist multicultural organization. And they've formed a committee to make that possible. And so every organization is learning together, and I'm hoping that as we go forward, we will all collaborate, because we're all doing this a little differently. And we need to be doing this work, and we need to have it reflected in our work with undergraduate candidates for becoming teachers. So Butch, I'll stop talking and let you talk for a little bit about this.
Sure. So these are difficult conversations to engage in and a difficult topic for most of us. And many of the organizations have hired facilitators or culturally responsive practitioners who can assist in this. Some of them have assigned readings or study groups. A couple of the things that people seem to talk about a lot, and I'm mostly a music learning theory person in the GIML organization. Judy really is multifaceted, but her roots are in the ORF Association. One of the things is our content. The repertoire that we do is so Western centric and Western European centric. And it doesn't need to be that way, but that's just the way it came to us. But the approaches are a fairly flexible framework. We can get where we need to be with different repertoire. So one of the big conversations is, how do we change the repertoire and include different communities and different cultures and exclude some repertoire that's just racist? We have been using ugly racist repertoire for 100 years in these approaches, and sometimes unwittingly, but it still is wrong. And just like every week, some new politician or celebrity emerges with a picture of them in college in blackface, about every week we figure out a tune that we've all been using for 100 years, and it's got terrible sexist or racist connotations. And teachers don't really like change. I don't know if any of you knew that, but that's a thing. Teachers don't really like to change. So extracting those harmful songs from our repertoire is a difficult task, and then replacing them with something that reaches out and builds a bridge to another community. That's important. And then the second thing is, we don't have enough practitioners who are authentic representations or ambassadors or culture bearers of these other marginalized communities, particularly in higher ed, but even just on the ground, elementary general teachers. We don't have enough teachers who can be authoritative and culture bearers of diverse cultures. And so how can we make people from marginalized cultures feel comfortable and want to be music teachers? How can we get them into our music schools? How can we get them through the licensure program? And how can we get them in schools? That is a really huge challenge for us. And I think it's, like a 50-year project, because we have to think about a kindergartner. What do we need to do for a kindergartner who started last week, and have that kid think about becoming a music ed major in 12 years?
Great questions, Butch. And I think that I'm going back to both of them. The first one about changing repertoire. I think your comment about using this repertoire unwittingly is right on. I think we have had too many times when we just didn't realize what we were doing. And then the process of change, as you said, is sometimes difficult. But I think once you know, you have to do it better. And I think that's why I really took to that Kodai statement about we will do better. And the other question about getting a more diverse teaching core of teachers, I think is really important. And again, that is something that goes on, it has to go on really long term. And we have to start someplace. So we have to start now with people who are now in elementary school, welcoming them. And one of our problems is that they don't see themselves as a teacher. And that's what you were referring to. There aren't enough of teachers from these minority groups that are actually in the classroom. So it is a difficult problem. And I think we have a big task ahead of us, but I think we realize now that we have to do it. So
Judy,
I'm going to go on. Is there anybody that has a comment or a question right now before I read out these questions that I have for us to think about together? If you do have a comment or a question, give us a sign so we can, or put it in the chat.
Judy, if I
Yeah.
could tell you, I copied the questions from your abstract and just put them in the chat here so people can follow along. That might
Okay, great. Thank you, Dan.
facilitate a little discussion. So if anybody has a response to any of those.
Are they, can I see them? I don't see the chat.
You might have to expand it on the
show content, is that it? Only the host can share.
It's on the right-hand side.
You know, I'm on my iPad and it works differently than, oh, here's the chat. Yeah, chat. Okay. Okay, now I see the questions. What is our role and responsibility to the marginalized groups? And as we deepen our own awareness, how are we developing our commitment and challenging these future teachers to grapple with the issues? And are we ourselves teaching in ways that encourage future teachers to have compassion for all human beings? And how does it factor into working with active music making pedagogies? Okay, so what do you think? Any kinds of comments are welcome. It doesn't have to just be about these questions. Yes, Natalia.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. Nice to meet all of you. My name is Natalia. I'm in Switzerland. I'm sorry if my English will be a little rough at the edges.
We love hearing your voice.
Thank you. Actually, I'm very interested in the very first question that you wrote. Diversity of cultures is very important. And the more you read researches that are available at the moment, the more you see that this question is raised all around the globe. What I want to ask is this issue, but with a little twist, because you say like all kinds of students, of course, all kinds of cultures, but are we also talking about disadvantaged students who at the moment, especially, they don't have enough access to online resources, students that they don't have, actually, in so many cases, parents, especially now, they say, well, music teaching can wait, music learning can wait. I mean, why is it so important? We first need to give them mathematics and language, and then maybe music they will decide for themselves. So what I feel right now, and the more I started teaching with the actually the baby classes, like from the very first weeks, we do the parent-children classes. And the more I teach, the more we need to prove to every single mother, every single family, how important it is for children to be involved from the very beginning into music. Because they say, well, you know what, I don't sing, I don't have a voice, I don't have music education, the child can do it later in life, it's fine. It's so very difficult. So I do think that our role and responsibility is enormous, but not only our roles. Somehow we need to bring it to the families directly, because it comes first from them. And then they come to school, and then we can, bombard them with all our knowledge and passion and expertise. Do you have any ideas, any suggestions how to tackle it with the families, how to show them that it's so very important to start with them?
This is a really important question. I'm so glad you asked it. I don't have the answer. I think it is a problem, and it goes deeper than just dealing with music. I think we have to be dealing with all sorts of injustices. So there are so many social justice concerns. There's racial justice, social justice, economic justice, environmental justice. All of these things are going on at the same time. And we have to work politically in some way to work on all of these things simultaneously. So I think we want to keep working on everything. I think you've identified a big problem. So I agree with you. What else? Butch?
So I think it's great that you brought this up, that there's the diversity that we can see with skin color. And then there's all the other diversity of socioeconomic status and gender and non-binary students and religion and all those other things that you have to know your students in order to be relevant and culturally responsible to them. So that's really tricky. I do the same thing as you. I teach early childhood baby music classes with parents and kids. And I think you have the best opportunity of everybody, because no one else gets to teach parents.
Yeah.
Only us. And so if you can help parents see the growth, the musical growth in a toddler, that is the best formula for them being committed to music. They see the advantage in their child, and you get to do it right in front of them. So I think early childhood music that's active and engages parents with little children is probably our very best attack.
Another thing I would want to mention, Natalia, is it Natalia? Yeah, Natalia, is that it's about social and emotional learning. And I think that sometimes in America and other countries, I heard you talk about mathematics or having them learn the more serious or tested subjects. I think recently in this country, we're aware more now of the social and emotional learning that happens on an interpersonal basis, and that happens best in face-to-face in real time. And so I think that's especially important for younger children, but also as they mature. And so I think especially in the arts, and especially in ways that are more self-expressive, we can have the child develop on a more holistic fashion, as opposed to test scores and the cognition that we can measure more easily, but really, what difference does it make in terms of their quality of life? So that's something else that I've been more recently aware of. So
Thank you so much. It's been great to hear all the such important views on this matter. Thank you.
have time for another question or two for our presenters, or perhaps something related?
So Suzanne's question.
Yes, there's one from John Habron, I see.
Hello. Thanks, Judy, for noticing, and thanks to you and Butch for your presentation. I've just finished washing up, so I can concentrate now more. Yes, I just wanted to say how I noticed that the Dalcroze Society of America had put out this statement, and I'm grateful for putting that in the context of the other major organizations that deal with music education methods, because I wasn't aware of those other ones. And it's great to see them being proactive. I agree with you that I think a concerted approach would possibly be better. So I'd like to encourage the leaders in those organizations to collaborate. But my point is it's a point really more than a question, but it's to consider the potential of these particular pedagogies. I don't know much about Gordon at all, I admit, but Dalcroze is my specialist area. And I know that obviously offshore work and Kadai both involve movement. Quite a lot of research on spirituality and music education. And one of the most important things that comes out of that is connection between people and their environment, and connection with themselves. And that building self-awareness and building social integration. And I think these methods actually have the potential to build the compassion that you're talking about, because they often work non-verbally as well.
Mm.
So it goes beyond language and beyond culture in that sense. What cultural baggage comes with language and linguistic markers. So I just want to encourage anyone who's involved in those pedagogies or related fields to think about using the power of movement, really. I think that, to me, is the key thing that enables social integration in very profound ways, because it's a non-verbal, communicative medium. And Butch is nodding. It goes right back to early years, obviously. But I think these pedagogies can bring that right through into adult education and to the end of life. So just a comment and an exhortation to continue, really. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Absolutely, yeah. We're approaching our about 15 more minutes before we finish this session online. I just first want to take a moment to say thank you all very much for participating. I wasn't sure what kind of response we would get online, but I'm very glad that you all are here. And would you take a minute to type in the chat, hello from wherever you are, so we can get a better sense of where people are from in your country, around the world. Whether it's morning, noon, or night. I would just like to have that for the record, to say we have now 25 people from however many countries sharing ideas and really taking the opportunity to collaborate virtually. So thank you from myself here in North Carolina, and would like to know where everyone is from. We are going to have one more presentation. The way that I'd like to do this is to play a video that our presenter uploaded. He uploaded a 22-minute video, and I'll play about 10 minutes of it or so that we have time to wrap things up. And the focus, as you'll see, is called, it's a clever name called Dabble Do Music. It is an approach that he's founded based in Ireland, and I'll let him explain things in more detail. Before we do that, let's have a round of applause, please, for Butch and for Judy. Thank you very much, Butch. Thank you, Judy, for your presentation. Okay, I will start to share my screen, and we'll begin here. At the end of this clip, I'll share the YouTube link. If you'd like to see the entire 22 minutes, you're welcome to do that. I just think it's important for us to have this opportunity. Okay, let's see. Here he is. Shane McKenna is his name. You can see the screen. Could I get a thumbs up or a nod or something? Yes. Okay. Butch says yes. Okay. Here we go.
From W Music, and I'm going to give you a
I am being told that you can't hear that. So let me try again. Here it is. I will leave myself unmuted. Sorry.
From W Music, and I'm going to give you a quick overview of how our online resource works for primary schools here in Ireland, and particularly focus on our use of graphic notation and new types of animated graphic notation to encourage both performance and composition in the classroom. So we'll have a quick look at the website, a quick overview, and then I'll show you how the music notation and how our interactive resources work. So all of our resources are delivered to schools online. So this is for primary schools in Ireland. And one of the major factors over here was that there hadn't been a new music curriculum in quite a while, or music resource for schools. So we thought it was time to develop a new one. So this is all delivered online to schools all across the country. And it has all the content that is in the required in the primary school curriculum over here. So there's a combination of listening, composing and performing content for all the schools. So this is all provided online. So a major part of developing this was that the majority of primary school teachers aren't music specialists. So a big part of this was to make the whole project as accessible as possible, so it was easy for teachers and schools to teach the full music curriculum, but in slightly more accessible ways. So we have a huge amount of listening content across all different genres and styles. And then of course we have for each class full yearly content we deliver. So a lot of this is, as I said, based on a lot of the listening content we have, but a lot of the performing and composing content that we have uses a system of music notation that was developed specifically for working with primary schools, and also for working with teachers who perhaps weren't that experienced in teaching music. And this is in the resource section, and this is what you're looking at. So a lot of this developed from my research in 2008 in Trinity College Dublin into music notation, graphic notation, and animated music notation, and finding new ways to create new types of notation that would make it easy to teach in the classroom and easy for children to access, particularly performing activities and composing activities in the classroom. So there's 5 different sections here, and throughout the year the children go along each one of these and cover different areas and different musical concepts as we go on. And there's different levels here depending on the different age group. So the very first section here, this really looks at sounds and symbols. So this is the basis of graphic notation, so connecting sounds and symbols. And it's also very good for early literacy for children, for connecting those sounds and symbols. So we start by asking the children to make the sounds below. Maybe you can join in as well. So if we see this symbol, we make the sound T. If we see this, we make the doorbell sound, ding dong. And it moves to more, well, we've got a pig, so the pig would make the sound. And then it moves to abstract ideas like a line starting low and going high. So doing that with our voices, it would be ooh. And the other way around, starting our voices high and going down low, it's pew. And a combination of the two, or going up and down, ooh. Then 3 dots, bloop, 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 or blop, 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 or so these are abstract symbols that can be interpreted in different ways. So I suppose that's an important part as well when we get them composing using their own symbols and sound combinations, that they have the freedom to create their own sound symbol connections. So let's say we've made all these sounds with the class. The next stage is to look at these in sequences. So this is our introduction to, again, music literacy, but also to get them into the idea of composing using symbols and shapes. So I press play here, and we have to say, is it the top line, the middle line, or the bottom? So is it 1, 2, or 3? So here we go. Ding dong, bloop, bloop, bloop. And that was the top one here. So we go through a series of these, and then that leads them into activities, composition activities, where they're thinking of maybe a different theme. Say they could be thinking of sounds from a farm, and they think of all the different sounds you hear in a farm and create symbols for each one and put them into their own sequence. So this is also introduced in these interactive resources in the composition section. So there's a section where the children now will get to choose. And it's also another important part for the whole method here is dividing up the class into 4 different color groups. So this is a method where if you've got a large group of children trying to make sound together, it's beneficial to have them all grouping together and making their own little sounds like they would in an orchestra. So with this activity, the children then get to choose their own symbols and assign them. So they've divided up into 4 different color groups. So a child will go up to the whiteboard, and say, choose the pig. That's usually their favorite sound. And then they fill that in underneath. And then the next child will go up and choose their own and fill it into whatever color that they're coming up from. And so they've created their own sequence, and then they can perform this with their voices again. And this can be done also on worksheets as well. So it's a great introduction to composition from a very simple point of view. But this develops then to more advanced parts for older classes, where they can really focus on instruments and how they sound, and particularly instruments interpreting these different symbols. So in this one, we're looking at different types of guitar: acoustic guitar, classical guitar, bass guitar, and electric guitar. And let's see which one this is. So you can hear, that's the bass guitar, it's sliding up and down, and then this one where it zigzags in pitch up and down again. Let's see. Or it attempts to make the sound of a pig, so it's interpreting this sound of a pig. And the 3 dots. So this is a great opportunity for the children to listen to the different sounds of instruments, but also to see how instruments can interpret these symbols and get to explore different instrumental sounds and how they work. So there's a whole range of different ways they can interact and do some serious listening into the different instruments. And they can also get more used to how these instruments work by, again, playing this spotting the line game. And that would be the bottom one. So this color-coded system then continues to something that we call the clock. And this is a great one for getting instruments out in the classroom and a great way to structure the performances. So first we ask them a simple question sometimes to get them moving along. How many colors in the clock? There's 5 colors here. So we have white, and we divide the class up. We can make up a sound for each color. So we could make up vocal sounds for this, and each group has a particular vocal sound, or we could use simple instruments. This can work with any instruments they have. So let's say yellow is a shaker, got one here. And then let's say red, the red group of children would get chime bars. And you can go on, divide up the instruments like that. So it works really with whatever instruments the class or the teacher would have available to them. And when the hand passes over your color, that's when each group makes their sound. So that's as simply as it works here. So here we go. So you have the full shaker group shaking. It could be just simple noise, or they could even come up with a rhythm. So a lot of that will be left up to the children to explore and find different ways of making sounds and different things. And then the red group. And then that's the silent moment. And then they're waiting to go again. And then say a homemade shaker here with pasta in it. So the clock is a great way for them to just get used to hearing the different sounds in different groups and performing together in a way that really keeps them engaged as they can see the colors that are coming, and they can make the connection between the color and the sound from different parts of the classroom. And as I said, this can work just with very simple sounds with the younger children, but it can also work with older children who want to experiment more and use rhythms or pitch or explore different chords or different combinations of notes. And they can really work to be creative and find their own way and their own sound for each group. That's a simple version of the clock.
And he continues with other aspects of this this website, this online tool. And I will stop sharing my screen if I can find it. Yes. Okay, there it is. And I will provide the link here if you're interested in seeing and hearing the
de um possível retorno, né? Deixa eu só
So this is his YouTube, all 22 minutes of it. There. I wanted just to ask comments, feedback, thoughts about that presentation. I needed to put it to everybody, didn't I? Here it is. This is the what are people's thoughts, maybe observations? I enjoyed the way that he was able to make the composition visual in a way that was child friendly and a way that was unsophisticated. And I also like the way that it was a tool to facilitate the active music making, so that the application didn't play for the child, but the child or the audience would actually make the music as opposed to having the computer play for him or her for them. Yeah, interactive virtual way. Yeah, and it could be motivational for the kids as well. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I probably missed that. What age is this assigned for?
He didn't specify a particular level, but it looked like it was lower elementary. I would probably say 7, 8-year-old, depending. But he did talk about the primary school as the audience for the entire Dabble Do music website.
Okay.
And if,
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry. It's definitely great pedagogical way, but I would try it with a bit younger and probably with help of adults. It's colorful. It's very nice. My 5-year-old would probably enjoy it much more than my 8-year-old. That's my personal opinion. So obviously, but yeah, maybe for a little younger, it would be much more inspiring.
it's an interesting observation. Good.
When he said for your older students, I was thinking, how much older are you going to go with that? You know, and I thought, so I don't know. I'm trying to picture a 6th grader doing that and thinking, oh my
Totally.
Take a look at the later part of the video. There are actually multiple concentric circles. So you can see and see the visualization of it gets more complicated, but I agree. I agree with that. Yeah. Before we finish, and because we're out of time now, I want to have a short advertisement for our Facebook page. This Active Music Making group is on Facebook, and here is the link. You're welcome to come and visit us on Facebook. Beth Rankin is our web mistress, and she's the one that manages things there, but we post things. And please join us on Facebook. It's another way that we like to promote active music making in ISME. And again, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. A special thank you to all the presenters for sharing their ideas. And I will probably send out a follow-up link that will have this recording and all the other materials so that you can review it if you'd like to return to any of it, or contact the presenters if you have questions or would like to pick their brain about other ideas. That's how I plan to end. Other comments or thoughts?
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you, Judy. And thanks to everyone for joining us this afternoon. Have a great rest of your day or night or wherever you are. And we'll see you online sometime soon. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.